I've been the county sheriff in Blackwood, Montana for 17 years now. Population of 843 souls, give or take a few who wander off to Billings or Missoula looking for something better. Most of them come back eventually. They always do. The city chews them up and spits them out, and they come crawling back to the mountains with their tails between their legs. The ones who don't come back, well, we try not to talk about them too much around here. Small towns have long memories, and sometimes those memories are the only graves that people ever get. You learn things when you've been doing this job as long as I have. You learn that domestic calls are the most dangerous kind you can respond to. More deputies die walking through those doors than any other type of call. The victim you're there to protect might turn on you, or the abuser might decide he's got nothing left to lose. You learn that people lie about the smallest things for the strangest reasons, and the truth usually comes out at the worst possible moment, when it can do the most damage. You learn that the mountains surrounding this valley don't care about your problems, or your deadlines, or your grief. And the winters will kill you just as surely as any bullet if you don't give them the respect they deserve. But the most important thing I've learned in all these years is that some cases don't close. Not really. They just stop moving forward. They sit in a drawer in your office, gathering dust, and they sit in a drawer in your mind, gathering weight. Every now and then you pull them out and look at them, turning the evidence over and over, hoping something new will suddenly make sense. Something you missed the first 100 times. It never does. But you keep looking anyway. You keep pulling that drawer open in the middle of the night when you can't sleep. Because what else can you do? What else can you do when a case involves a child? Emma Whitfield was one of those cases. She still is. She was 9 years old when she disappeared from Cedar Road. Blonde hair that her mother always kept in 2 neat braids, tied off with purple ribbons because purple was Emma's favorite color. Blue eyes the color of a summer sky. The kind of blue you see in Montana in July when there's not a cloud for 100 miles. She was missing her 2 front teeth because they'd fallen out the week before, and the new ones hadn't grown in yet. I remember that detail specifically because her mother kept saying it over and over again, like it was the most important thing in the world. She doesn't have her front teeth, Margaret Whitfield told me on that first night, grabbing my arm hard enough to leave bruises that lasted for days. Her fingernails dug into my skin through my uniform shirt. How is she going to eat, Sheriff? How is she going to smile for pictures? She was so embarrassed about it. She wouldn't even smile for her school photo this year. She covered her mouth with her hand. She's going to be so upset when those pictures come back and she's not smiling. I didn't have an answer for her then. I still don't have one now, 6 years later. Those school pictures came back 3 weeks after Emma vanished, delivered to a house that had become a crime scene. Margaret kept them anyway, put them in a frame on the mantel, right next to Emma's baby photos and her first-grade graduation certificate, and a crayon drawing of the family that Emma had made in art class. A shrine to a girl who had walked into the woods one October afternoon and never walked out again. Emma vanished on October 14th, 2018. It was a Tuesday, and she was walking home from the school bus stop, same as she did every single day. The weather was perfect, clear skies, temperature in the mid-50s, a light breeze coming down from the mountains carrying the smell of pine and the first hints of approaching winter. The kind of day that makes you glad to live in Montana, away from the noise and the traffic and the millions of people stacked on top of each other in cities that never sleep. The distance from the bus stop on Route 12 to the Whitfield Ranch was about a quarter mile. Most of that walk was along Cedar Road, which cuts through a stretch of old-growth pine forest before opening up to their property. It's a beautiful walk in the fall, with the aspens turning gold and the first dustings of snow on the peaks above. Emma had made that walk hundreds of times over the years. She knew every rock, every tree, every bend in the road. Her mother had drilled safety rules into her head since she was old enough to walk. Stay on the road, don't talk to strangers, Go straight home. Call if anything seems wrong. She never made it home that day. The last person to see her alive was the bus driver, Martha Hendricks, who watched Emma step off the bus and start walking down Cedar Road. Martha said Emma waved goodbye through the window, same as always. She was carrying her pink backpack, the one with the cartoon horses on it. She was wearing jeans and a purple sweater and white sneakers with Velcro straps, because she was still learning to tie her laces. That was the last time anyone saw Emma Whitfield. Margaret Whitfield called my office at 4:47 p.m., exactly 17 minutes after Emma should have walked through the front door. At first, I have to admit, I told her not to worry too much. Kids get distracted sometimes. They stop to look at interesting bugs or chase butterflies across a meadow. They pick wildflowers for their mothers or skip rocks in streams. They lose track of time because they're 9 years old, and time doesn't mean the same thing to them as it does to adults. It happens all the time, especially with the imaginative ones. And Emma was definitely imaginative. Her teachers at Blackwood Elementary said she was always making up stories, creating elaborate fantasy worlds in her head. She'd write them down in notebooks and illustrate them with colored pencils, fairies and dragons and magical kingdoms hidden in the forest. Maybe, I told Margaret, she'd just gotten caught up in some daydream out there on Cedar Road. Maybe she was sitting on a log somewhere, scribbling in her notebook and lost track of time. But Margaret knew her daughter better than anyone. She knew something was wrong. I could hear it in her voice, that edge of panic that comes from a mother's instinct. And by the time I drove out to Cedar Road myself, lights flashing, radio crackling with reports from deputies I'd dispatched to search the area, I knew it too. Something was very, very wrong. We searched for 3 weeks straight. Every able body in Blackwood County joined the effort. Ranchers and shopkeepers and retirees and teenagers. People who hadn't spoken to each other in years put aside their feuds and their grievances and walked side by side through those woods, calling Emma's name until their voices gave out. We brought in tracking dogs from the K-9 unit in Helena, helicopters from the National Guard, search and rescue volunteers from as far away as Great Falls. We combed through that forest inch by inch, grid by grid, until we'd covered every square foot of wilderness within a 20-mile radius of where she'd disappeared. We dragged the river. We rappelled into old mine shafts. We checked every abandoned cabin and hunting blind and root cellar in the county. We followed every tip, no matter how far-fetched. Someone thought they saw a girl matching Emma's description at a truck stop in Butte. Someone else swore they spotted her in the back of a van heading toward the Idaho border. We chased every lead, every rumor, every whisper. Nothing. It was like she'd been plucked right off the face of the earth. No witnesses despite the broad daylight. No physical evidence except what we found in the first hour. No leads that went anywhere. Just a pink backpack we discovered about 50 yards into the tree line, its contents scattered across the forest floor like someone had dumped it out in a hurry. Her lunchbox was there, still containing half a peanut butter sandwich with the crusts cut off the way she liked it. Her homework folder with a worksheet on fractions that was due the next day. She'd already finished most of it on the bus ride home. A library book about horses that was 2 days overdue. A keychain flashlight her father had given her for emergencies, still in its plastic wrapper, never used. But no Emma. No footprints leading anywhere. No trail to follow. No sign of a struggle. Nothing that could tell us what had happened in those woods. The FBI got involved on day 3. They always do when it's a kid, especially a young white girl from a good family in a small town. It makes for good headlines and good optics. They sent a whole team up from the Salt Lake City field office. Profilers who'd worked child abduction cases all over the western states. Forensic specialists with equipment we'd never seen before. Victim advocates trained to help families through the worst moments of their lives. They took over the investigation, which I didn't mind. I just wanted to find Emma. I didn't care who got the credit. They ran their profiles and their databases and their fancy computer programs. They analyzed every sex offender in a 200-mile radius. They interviewed everyone Emma had ever met, from her kindergarten teacher to the old man who ran the candy store on Main Street. They reconstructed her movements minute by minute on the day she disappeared. They brought in psychics and bloodhounds and even a specialist in reading soil disturbances. And they came up with the same thing we did. Nothing. No registered sex offenders in the area who fit the profile. No suspicious vehicles reported on Cedar Road that day. No credible tips despite the $100,000 reward. 50 from the Whitfields, and another 50 matched by a local businessman who'd known Emma since she was born. Nothing. Not a single solid lead. After 6 months, the FBI packed up and left. The lead agent, a woman named Chen who'd been doing this job for 20 years and had seen too many cases just like this one, told me before she went that sometimes children just disappear. Sometimes there are no answers, no matter how hard you look. Sometimes all you can do is hope that wherever they are, they're not suffering. I wanted to punch her in the face for saying that. Instead, I shook her hand and thanked her for her help and watched her drive away. After a year, the volunteers stopped coming. The posters faded on telephone poles and bulletin boards around town, bleached by the sun and torn by the wind until Emma's face was barely recognizable. People started referring to her in the past tense, even though we'd never found a body, never had any proof she was dead. "Emma was such a sweet girl," they'd say. "Emma loved horses." Past tense, gone tense. After 2 years, Margaret Whitfield stopped calling my office every day. She still called, just not as often. Once a week at first, then once a month. Then only on Emma's birthday and the anniversary of her disappearance. Her voice got quieter each time, the hope draining out of it like water from a cracked cup. After 3 years, her husband Tom hanged himself in their barn. I was the one who found him. Margaret had called the office around 6 a.m., frantic, saying Tom hadn't come to bed the night before and his truck was still in the driveway. I drove out there myself, lights and sirens off because I already knew, somehow, what I was going to find. I walked into that barn with my flashlight out and my heart pounding, and there he was, hanging from the main beam, the one he'd helped his grandfather install when he was just a teenager. His face was purple, his eyes bulging, his tongue swollen and protruding. He'd used the same rope he'd used to hang Emma's tire swing from the oak tree in the backyard. I cut him down myself while Margaret screamed on the phone with the paramedics. It was too late, of course. He'd been dead for hours. The body was cold and stiff. The rope had left deep grooves in the flesh of his neck. There was a note in his shirt pocket, crumpled up, like he'd wadded it into a ball and then smoothed it out again before putting it there. Like he'd almost changed his mind but then decided to go through with it anyway. Just 3 words, written in his shaky handwriting. I saw her. I never told Margaret about that note. I kept it to myself, filed it away with all the other things about this case that I couldn't explain. I figured she'd been through enough without adding one more mystery to the pile. I figured Tom had finally cracked under the weight of losing his daughter, and his mind had started playing tricks on him near the end. Grief does that to people. Guilt does that to people. It makes them see things that aren't there, hear voices in the silence. It breaks them down piece by piece until there's nothing left. At least, that's what I told myself. At least, that's what I needed to believe. 3 years after Tom's death, 6 years after Emma disappeared, we held a memorial service. Margaret had finally accepted that her daughter wasn't coming home. She'd sold the ranch and moved to Bozeman to live with her sister. Couldn't stand being in that house anymore with its empty rooms and its memories and that tire swing still hanging from the oak tree in the backyard. But she came back for the service. Said she needed closure. Said she needed to say goodbye. We buried an empty casket in the Blackwood Cemetery, right next to Tom. White wood with silver handles, small enough that it made your chest hurt just to look at it. The whole town came out, everyone dressed in black, faces solemn and sad. Pastor Reynolds said some words about God's mysterious plan and how Emma was in a better place now, running through fields of flowers in heaven, playing with other children who'd been called home too soon. I stood in the back by the old oak trees and watched the clouds roll over the mountains and tried not to think about all the ways I'd failed that little girl. Margaret threw the first handful of dirt onto the casket. It made a sound like rain on a tin roof. She didn't cry. She just stood there in her black dress, staring down into the hole, and I wondered what she was thinking. I wondered if she felt any relief, any peace. I wondered if this would finally let her move on with what was left of her life. That was 3 months ago. Last night at 2:47 a.m., my phone rang. Now, I've been getting calls in the middle of the night for 17 years. It's just part of the job when you're the only law enforcement for 50 miles in any direction. Drunk drivers wrapping their trucks around telephone poles on the winding mountain roads. Domestic disputes that turn violent after the bars close and the alcohol hits hard. Cattle getting loose on the highway and creating hazards for anyone driving through. Heart attacks, house fires, drug overdoses, teenagers doing stupid things that teenagers do. You name it, I've gotten a call about it at some ungodly hour. So when my phone lit up with the dispatch number, I didn't think much of it. Just another night in Blackwood County. Just another emergency in an endless stream of emergencies that make up a sheriff's life. "Sheriff Dawson," I answered, already reaching for my pants on the chair beside the bed. "Sheriff, it's Marlene. Marlene Oakes has been running our dispatch for almost as long as I've been sheriff. She's 63 years old, chain smokes Marlboro Reds, and has a vocabulary that would make a sailor blush. Nothing rattles her. I once heard her calmly direct a woman through delivering her own baby during a blizzard while simultaneously coordinating a response to a 3-car pileup on the interstate. She's the best dispatcher I've ever worked with, and she's seen everything this county has to offer. But something in her voice that night made me stop with one leg in my jeans. "What is it?" I asked. "We got a 911 call about 20 minutes ago. She paused. In 17 years, I have never heard Marlene Oakes pause in the middle of a sentence. Not once. Not even when she was telling me that a school bus had gone off the Henderson Bridge with 23 children on board. "I need you to come listen to something, Sheriff. Right now." I was at the station in 15 minutes, maybe less. The roads were empty at that hour. Nothing but my headlights cutting through the darkness and the occasional pair of glowing eyes reflecting back from the tree line. Deer, probably. Or maybe elk come down from the high country. The mountains loomed black against a sky full of stars, and I remember thinking how peaceful everything looked. How normal. How completely, utterly ordinary. That was the last time anything felt normal. Marlene was waiting for me at the dispatch desk, her face pale and drawn under the harsh fluorescent lights. She's a heavy-set woman with steel-gray hair she keeps pinned back in a tight bun, and reading glasses that are always perched on the end of her nose. In all the years I've known her, I've never seen her look scared. Annoyed, yes. Frustrated, often. Exhausted after a long shift, absolutely. But never scared. She was scared now. I could see it in the trembling of her hands as she reached for her coffee cup. In the way her eyes kept darting to the computer screen like she expected something to jump out of it. The ashtray next to her monitor was overflowing with cigarette butts. She'd chain-smoked half a pack since the call came in. "Sit down," she said, gesturing to the empty chair beside her workstation. "I'm going to play you the recording, the whole thing. Don't say anything until it's done." I sat. She pressed a button on her computer. The recording started with the standard automated stuff: timestamp, date, incoming phone number, the routing information that gets logged with every 911 call. Then Marlene's voice, professional and calm. 911, what's your emergency?" Silence followed, but not complete silence. There was something in the background, static maybe, or wind blowing across a phone microphone. And underneath that, barely audible, a sound like breathing. Slow and deliberate, like someone trying very hard to be quiet. "Hello?" Marlene's recorded voice said. "Is someone there? Can you tell me what's happening?" More silence, more breathing, then a voice, a child's voice, a little girl, no more than 8 or 9 years old. She sounded scared, no, more than scared, terrified. Her words came out in a whisper, barely audible, like she was trying desperately not to be heard by someone nearby. "Please help me. I'm at the Whitfield house on Cedar Road. Please. He won't let me leave. He's been keeping me here. Please, you have to help me." Every hair on my body stood up. My heart stopped beating for what felt like a full minute, then started again at triple speed. Because I knew that voice. I knew it as well as I knew my own name, my own heartbeat, my own face in the mirror. I'd listened to it 1,000 times on old home videos during the investigation. I'd heard it in my nightmares every night for 6 years. I'd heard it calling out to me in dreams where I was always running, always searching, always too late. It was Emma Whitfield. On the recording, Marlene asked, "Honey, can you tell me your name? Who won't let you leave?" "My name is Emma. Emma Whitfield. I live on Cedar Road with my mommy and daddy. Well, I used to live there, before he took me. Please, you have to help me. He's coming back. He always comes back. I can hear him moving in the walls. Emma, I need you to stay calm. We're going to send someone to help you. Can you tell me more about who's keeping you there? What does he look like?" A long pause. When Emma spoke again, her voice had dropped even lower, barely a whisper now. "He's tall, so tall that he has to bend down to fit in the rooms. And his face." A sob caught in her throat. "He doesn't have a face. I mean, he has a face, but it's not a face. It's like someone forgot to finish drawing him, like a person made out of shadows. Please hurry, please. I can hear him coming. He's coming up the stairs." The line went dead. Marlene stopped the recording and looked at me. Her hands were shaking so badly that she had to set down her coffee cup before she spilled it all over the console. "That's not possible," I said. My voice didn't sound like my own. It sounded hollow, far away, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "She's dead, Marlene. We buried her 3 months ago." "We buried an empty casket," Marlene reminded me quietly. "We never found a body, Sheriff. You know that better than anyone." "That voice—" I couldn't finish the sentence, because that voice was right. It was exactly, perfectly right. Not just the sound of it, but the cadence, the rhythm, the way she pronounced certain words, the slight lisp from the missing front teeth, the way she said mommy and daddy instead of mom and dad like most kids her age. Every single detail was perfect. "I know," Marlene said. "I know. What number did the call come from?" She turned the computer monitor toward me so I could see it for myself. I read the number 3 times before the words next to it finally registered in my brain. The call had come from the Whitfield residence on Cedar Road, the house that had been empty and abandoned for 3 years, the house where Tom Whitfield had hanged himself from the barn beam, the house where Emma Whitfield had lived before she vanished into thin air, the house that Margaret couldn't bear to sell because selling it would mean admitting once and for all that her daughter was never coming home. "I already sent Deputy Morrison out there," Marlene said. "He should be arriving any minute now. But I figured you'd want to—" I was already out the door before she finished the sentence. The drive to the Whitfield place normally takes about 20 minutes from town, winding through forest roads that get treacherous in winter but are empty and peaceful on a summer night. I made it in 12. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard that my knuckles had turned white and my forearms ached. My mind was racing through possibilities, trying to find something that made sense. A prank call. That was the most obvious explanation. Some local kid had gotten hold of old recordings and was playing a sick joke. Or maybe a squatter had broken into the abandoned house and was using the phone to... But no, the phone service had been disconnected years ago. Marlene would have mentioned if the call had come from a cell phone. There had to be a rational explanation. There had to be something that made sense. Something I could put in a report and file away without losing my grip on reality. There had to be. Deputy Jake Morrison's cruiser was already parked in the driveway when I pulled up, its emergency lights painting the front of the house in alternating red and blue. The house looked exactly as it had the last time I'd been here for Tom's death, paint peeling in long strips from the wooden siding, windows dark and empty like the eyes of a corpse, the front porch sagging under the weight of years of neglect. Margaret had stopped paying for upkeep after she moved away. Nature was slowly reclaiming the property. The tire swing still hung from the oak tree in the front yard. It creaked back and forth in the slight breeze, turning slowly like something waiting. Jake was standing by his cruiser, flashlight in one hand, his other hand resting on his sidearm. He's a good deputy, 26 years old, been with the department for 3 years now. Got a wife named Sarah and a baby on the way, a daughter they'd found out just last week during the ultrasound. He'd been so excited he'd brought cigars to the station even though nobody was supposed to smoke inside. He's never once complained about the night shifts or the lousy pay or the fact that most of his job consists of telling drunk teenagers to go home and sleep it off. But when I got out of my truck and walked over to him, I could see something was wrong. His face was pale, even in the strobing red and blue light. His hand on the flashlight wasn't steady. "Sheriff," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "I did a full perimeter check when I got here. All the doors and windows are locked from the inside. No sign of forced entry anywhere. No footprints in the dust on the porch, and there's a lot of dust. Nobody has been in or out of this house in a very long time. What about the phone line? I called the utility company on my way here. Service was disconnected in March of 2021, right after Mrs. Whitfield moved out. There's been no active phone service to this address in over 3 years. No way anyone could have made a call from here." I stared at the dark windows of the house. They seemed to stare back. "Then how the hell did someone call 911 from here?" Jake didn't have an answer. Neither did I. "We're going in," I said after a long moment. "Stay behind me. Keep your weapon holstered unless I tell you otherwise. You see anything at all, you call it out immediately. Understood?" "Yes, sir." I had a key to the Whitfield place. Margaret had given it to me years ago, pressed it into my hand with trembling fingers and told me to use it whenever I needed to, in case we ever found something new, in case we ever needed to search the property again, in case Emma somehow found her way home and needed to get inside. I'd never used it, never had a reason to, but I'd kept it on my key ring all this time, a small piece of brass that represented everything I couldn't solve, every promise I couldn't keep. The lock turned smoothly, like it had been used yesterday. The door swung open with a long, slow creak that echoed through the empty house like a warning. "Sheriff's Department," I called out into the darkness. "Is anyone in here?" Nothing, just the echo of my own voice bouncing off walls that hadn't heard a human sound in years. We swept the first floor room by room, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. The living room with its dust-covered furniture and family photos still hanging on the walls. I recognized Emma in one of them. Gap-toothed smile, blonde braids, her father's arm around her shoulder. The kitchen where dishes still sat in the drying rack beside the sink, left behind when Margaret fled to her sister's house. A coffee mug on the counter that said, "World's Best Mom," a Mother's Day gift from Emma just a few months before she disappeared. The bathroom, the laundry room, the small office where Tom used to sit for hours doing the ranch's accounting. Everything was exactly as it should be. Abandoned, empty, dead. The stairs to the second floor groaned under our weight as we climbed them, each step announcing our presence. At the top, a narrow hallway stretched in both directions. Master bedroom to the right. I could see the edge of a neatly made bed through the partially open door. Bathroom straight ahead, a sliver of moonlight filtering through the frosted glass window. And to the left, Emma's room. The door was closed. Pink paint, slightly faded now but still cheerful despite everything. A wooden sign hung on the door that read, Emma's room, in childish letters, decorated with hand-painted flowers and butterflies. Margaret had made that sign when Emma was 4 years old. I remembered because Emma had told me about it during one of our early interviews, proud of her mother's artistic ability. I reached out and put my hand on the doorknob. It was cold. Not cool from being in an unheated house. Cold. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you shiver even in the middle of summer. The kind of cold that doesn't belong anywhere in July. The metal of the doorknob actually burned my palm with its chill. I turned the knob. I pushed the door open. And that's when I saw her. Standing in the middle of the room, bathed in pale moonlight streaming through the window, was a little girl. Blonde hair pulled back in 2 neat braids with purple ribbons. Blue eyes the color of a summer sky. A gap where her 2 front teeth should have been. She was wearing the same clothes Emma had been wearing the day she disappeared 6 years ago. Faded jeans, a purple sweater with a cartoon horse on the front, white sneakers with Velcro straps. She looked exactly like the photos on the missing person posters. She looked exactly like she had on October 14th, 2018. She hadn't aged a single day in 6 years. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please. He's coming back. He always comes back." And then every light in the house went out. The darkness that swallowed us wasn't normal. It wasn't the kind of dark you get when the power goes out and you wait for your eyes to adjust. This was something else entirely. Thick and heavy, pressing against my skin like wet cloth, filling my nose and mouth with the taste of earth and decay. I couldn't see Jake even though he'd been standing right behind me. I couldn't see the door, the walls, my own hand in front of my face. I couldn't see the girl. "Jake!" I shouted. My voice sounded wrong, muffled and distant, like I was yelling through a pillow or from the bottom of a deep well. "Jake! Where are you? Morrison, answer me!" Nothing. Just the darkness, pressing in from every direction. I fumbled for my flashlight on my belt, found it, clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, but barely. It was like trying to shine a light through thick fog or black smoke. I could see maybe 3 feet in front of me, and everything beyond that was swallowed by shadow. Emma's room had changed. The pink walls were still there, but they were darker now. Stained. Streaked with something that might have been water damage or might have been something else. Something that looked disturbingly like old blood, dried to a rusty brown. The posters of horses and pop stars and cartoon characters that had decorated her room were gone, replaced by drawings. Dozens of them. Hundreds. They covered every inch of wall space, layered on top of each other, some fresh and bright, others yellowed with age. They were all the same picture. A child's drawing, crude but terrifyingly recognizable. A stick-figure girl with yellow hair and a purple dress. A house with smoke coming from the chimney. A winding road that led into dark trees. And standing in the trees, watching, always watching, a tall, thin figure with no face. Just a smooth oval where features should be, and arms that stretched too long, and fingers that ended in sharp points. In some of the drawings, the figure was standing far away among the trees. In others, it was closer. Behind the house, on the road, in the yard, in the doorway. In the newest drawings,
the ones on top. The figure was inside the house, inside Emma's room, standing right behind a stick-figure girl with yellow hair. "He's been here the whole time," a voice said from behind me. I spun around so fast I nearly dropped my flashlight. Emma was there, standing in what had been the doorway. But the doorway wasn't there anymore, just an opening into more darkness, an endless void that seemed to pulse and breathe like something alive. She was silhouetted against it like a photograph negative, the outline of a little girl against an ocean of nothing. "Emma," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Emma, it's Sheriff Dawson. Do you remember me? I came to your house after you disappeared. I've been looking for you. Everyone has been looking for you for 6 years." "I know," she said. Her voice was different now. Flat, empty, ancient. Nothing like the scared whisper from the 911 call. "I watched you looking. I watched you searching the woods and dragging the river and putting up posters with my face on them. I watched you sitting in your office with my file on your desk, staring at the pictures, trying to figure out what happened to me. I watched you at the memorial service, standing in the back while they put an empty box in the ground with my name on it. I watched you give up." "We didn't give up," I said, the words coming out desperate, pleading. "We never stopped looking, Emma. I never stopped." "You buried me." Her voice was cold as the doorknob had been. "You put a casket in the ground with my name on it. Pastor Reynolds said I was in heaven with the angels. Everyone cried and wore black clothes, and then they went home and ate casseroles and talked about how sad it was. You told everyone I was dead, Sheriff. You held a funeral for me. We thought, after 6 years, we believed." I couldn't finish. What could I possibly say? We had given her a funeral. We had moved on. We had closed the book on Emma Whitfield and told ourselves it was the kindest thing to do. We had buried an empty casket and called it closure. "I'm not dead," Emma said, stepping closer. I could see her face more clearly now in the weak light of my flashlight. It was her face, Emma's face. But there was something wrong with it, something hollow and ancient behind those blue eyes, something that shouldn't be there in the eyes of a 9-year-old girl. Not exactly dead, but not alive either. Not anymore. He took that from me. He takes it from everyone. "Who?" I asked. "Emma, tell me who did this to you. Tell me who took you, and I swear You can't arrest him." There was something almost like pity in her voice now. "You can't shoot him. You can't lock him in a cell or put him on trial. You can't even really see him, not the way I can. He's been here since before the town was built. Before Cedar Road was a road. Before these trees were trees. He was here when this was all just mountains and sky and empty land. And he'll be here long after everything else is dust and memory." The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, like someone had opened a door to the frozen heart of winter. I could see my breath now, white plumes of vapor hanging in the air. The flashlight flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging me into absolute darkness. And in that darkness, I heard something moving. Not footsteps. Nothing so normal as footsteps. It was more like the sound of air being displaced, of space being pushed aside by something that didn't belong in our world. Something large and wrong and patient. "He sees you now," Emma whispered, her voice coming from everywhere at once. "He's been sleeping for so long, down in the dark places. But you woke him up. Your fear woke him up. He can smell it on you. The fear and the guilt and the grief. He feeds on those things. They're what keep him alive." I drew my service weapon with shaking hands. Standard procedure, even though somehow I knew with absolute certainty that it wouldn't help. But it was something to hold, something solid and real in a situation that had become anything but. "Show yourself,"
I shouted into the darkness. "Sheriff's Department! I'm armed!" The displacement sound stopped instantly. For one terrible moment, there was perfect silence. Not just quiet, silence. No sound at all. Not even my own breathing or the pounding of my heart, which I knew was racing because I could feel it trying to break through my ribs. Just absolute, complete, perfect silence, like the whole world had stopped turning. Then, right next to my ear, so close that I felt cold breath on my skin and frost forming on my cheek. "Sheriff." It wasn't a voice. Not really. It was more like the idea of a voice, projected directly into my mind, bypassing my ears entirely. Deep and ancient and utterly inhuman. The kind of voice that makes you understand, on some primal level buried deep in your DNA, that you are prey and always have been. I fired. The muzzle flash lit up the room for a split second, and in that frozen instant of light, I saw. I don't know how to describe what I saw. My brain refuses to hold on to it. Every time I try to remember, the image slides away like water through cupped hands. But I remember fragments, pieces, something impossibly tall, 8 feet, 9 feet, tall enough that it had to bend to fit in the room. Something impossibly thin, like a person who had been stretched on a rack until they came apart at the seams. Something with too many angles, too many joints, like it had been folded wrong by someone who didn't understand how reality was supposed to work. And where its face should have been, nothing. Just smooth, pale skin stretched tight over the suggestion of features. The outline of eye sockets without eyes. The shape of a mouth that had never opened. A face that was the absence of a face. Then the flash was gone and the darkness swallowed everything again. I ran. I'm not proud of it. 17 years as county sheriff, sworn to protect and serve, and I ran like a child from a nightmare. But in that moment, every instinct I had, every million years of evolution that had taught my ancestors to flee from predators, was screaming at me to get out, to run, to put as much distance as possible between myself and that thing. So I ran. I don't know how I found my way out. The house had become a maze, hallways stretching longer than they should, doors opening into rooms that hadn't existed before, stairs that led nowhere. But somehow, through some miracle or instinct, I burst through the front door and out onto the porch and kept running until I slammed into Jake's cruiser hard enough to dent the fender. Jake was inside, sitting in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead at nothing. His eyes were open but completely empty. There was a thin line of drool running from the corner of his mouth. "Jake!" I yanked the door open, grabbed his shoulder, shook him hard. "Jake, snap out of it! Morrison, look at me!" He blinked. Once. Twice. His eyes slowly focused on my face, and then his expression crumpled like paper in a fist. "Sheriff," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I saw my daughter, but she hasn't been born yet. She's not due for 3 more months. She was walking toward me in the dark, but she was so pale, so cold, and she looked at me and said, 'Daddy, why did you let him take me?' How did I see my daughter, Sheriff? How is that possible?" I pulled him out of the car, pushed him toward my truck. "We're leaving. Right now. Don't look back." I drove too fast on those dark roads, much too fast. But I didn't slow down until the Whitfield house was miles behind us. Back at the station, Marlene made coffee and didn't ask questions. She just sat with us while we shook and stared at our cups. Finally, "What did you find?" Jake looked at me. I looked at him. "Nothing," I said. "Technical malfunction." Marlene didn't believe me, but she nodded and filed the report anyway. Jake quit the next week, said he was moving to Helena for a desk job. I don't blame him. I stayed, started researching, Found records going back to 1887, disappearances every decade. Always children, always on Cedar Road. And I found a note from the first sheriff. The tall man. He has been here longer than we have. The natives called him the one who walks between. He collects children because they can see him clearly. Stay off the old paths after dark. And if you hear a child calling for help where no child should be, don't answer. It's not the child anymore. It's him. I went back to the house, found Emma in her room. She told me everything, about the place between places, about all the children he's taken over the centuries, about her father who came looking for her and saw something that broke his mind. "You can't stop him," she said, "but you can watch. You can be faster, and maybe you can save the next one." That's what I'm doing now. Watching, waiting, warning people in ways they'll accept. Coyote sightings. Don't let kids walk alone. Stay out of the woods. They think I'm paranoid. They don't know what I know. I've been reaching out to people who study these things. Most think I'm crazy. But a few have told me things. Ways to weaken creatures like him. Ways to slow him down. If you're reading this, watch your children. If they talk about seeing someone tall in the woods, someone with no face, listen to them. Believe them. Don't let them walk alone through Old Forest. The tall man is real. He's been here forever. But maybe, with enough time and sacrifice, he can be stopped. That's what I'm working toward. Finding a way to free Emma and all the others. It might take years. It might kill me. But I'm going to do it. I promised her I'd come back, and I keep my promises.